I am excited. I wanted to hop on and do a mini training today because I was looking for some images for social and I found this one designer's website and I thought this would be really useful and a really great visual of this concept. So I want to talk again about furniture styles and why they matter so much. And the first thing I want to say is this is not a criticism of this designer. First and foremost, you have to remember that as a designer, you can only go as far as the client lets you go. And sometimes the client insists on certain things that you personally, as a designer, would not choose. So I just want to say this is not me criticizing this designer, and I'm doing this on purpose. So both of these images are from the same designer. And I'm going to talk about why I think one is done really well and why I think one could use some improvement. And it all comes down to furniture styles. So let's get into this. I want to talk about this image on the left first. Now, as a whole, this image is pretty chaotic. We don't have a super cohesive feeling. It doesn't feel like there was an intention for this space. It kind of feels like we just threw a whole bunch of things in. And if we look at things outside of the furniture, so if we look at the wall color, if we look at the beams here, if we look at the wood, if we look at the windows, there's nothing that's screaming incohesive right off the bat. Like, we have white walls, we have dark windows, we have light wood. Those are all traditionally things that are paired together and work very well. But what's interesting here is all the different furniture styles. So I'm going to go through here. This is a mid-century modern couch. These are contemporary, but I would argue modern tables, right? We have this metal paired with glass. It's even verging on 80s a little bit for me. Then we have this rattan little ottoman here. So now we're bringing in some boho. You can't completely see this piece of furniture, but it's almost a somewhat Asian style console table. You can maybe argue mid-century modern. We can't see the whole piece, so it is kind of hard for me to tell. But then we have these very traditional chairs. Now, you will see we have this kind of color concept coming through of this caramel tone carried out in the wood here. The rattan's kind of that same color. The wood's kind of that same color. And then we hop over here. This is a very contemporary console. And then again, we kind of have this like postmodern lamp going on. And then if I look at this little end table here, it's hard to even call it an end table. I think it's probably a stool, but looks very, you could maybe make the argument for mid-century modern, but relatively pretty industrial or simplistic in nature. But what you'll notice is I've already listed like 5 different furniture styles. And this is what I mean when we unify based on color alone. So if we said the unifying principles was, you know, the color, or even I think online they tried to say the shapes, because we have some curves here, we have a curve here, there's some curves here. The overall aesthetic is not as successful as when we stick to something where we bring down the amount of those furniture styles. So I want to kind of show you the opposite here. Again, the exact same designer, and I think this design is stunning. So we look at the furniture in the image on the right, and we have a very contemporary sofa. It looks like a built-in sofa. We have a contemporary table. We have contemporary little side pieces here that are completely made out of stone. And then we have these really fun, funky, if I'm being simplistic, I would call them traditional chairs. There probably is a specific time period for these chairs. They have a little bit of a medieval edge to them. But then we have this contemporary / traditional, depending on, like, stripes are a traditional pattern, but currently they're being used repetitively with contemporary furniture. So depending how you want to take that interpretation, we have this pattern kind of on top of the furniture. So you'll see we're really only mixing two furniture styles in this image, but I love this image because to look at this image, you wouldn't say, oh, everything's like contemporary and that's why it works. Because these are all very different takes on one style of furniture paired with something kind of unique. And then they have some more play in the smaller accessories. We have a cool mirror here. We have some contemporary but somewhat vintage lights. And then we have, some cool vases. We're playing with size. There's still interest in this design, but it's not necessarily established through all these different furniture styles. And so I just want to kind of show you the differences here because there's no way that they paid the designer less than they paid, right? Like both people paid for a designer. Both people paid for the furniture in these spaces. Both people invested time and money into these projects. But one is much more successful than the other. And a lot of that really does come down to furniture styles and being intentional about the large pieces we're putting in a space. Because again, like a mirror is not going to make or break this design. If they wanted to throw in something bright and contemporary and super different, it would just be an accent or a focal point in this design. It wouldn't derail the design. Versus on the left here, there's so much going on that if we add another piece, it's just going to feel like another chaotic moment scattered throughout that room. It doesn't feel intentional.